everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video. And today I wanted to take a little fun look at what cards I would like to see get unnerfed that will be going to wild at rotation. So, as you know, last year, or you might not be aware, they reverted a bunch of nerfs that had happened. We saw like Raza, a raiding party get unnerfed, and it made a big difference in wild. Hell, it's kind of been problematic, at least with Raza Priest being like so dominant. But I do think it's a good thing that they've done it, and I hope that they do it again. So I wanted to take a look at what 10 cards I would like to see get unnerfed that will be rotating from the sets of like Rise of Shadows, Descent of Dragons, Saviors of Uldum, Galakronds Awakening, and one other card that's from an even older set that I would like to see get unnerfed. So I'd also like to point out I'm not going to include cards like Ankar or Total and Pilgrim that were basically nerfed. You know, they were really powerful in Wild and really toxic in Wild in terms of Pilgrim. I wouldn't revert those nerfs. Ankar is still an incredibly powerful card. Pilgrim just does really broken, unfun things, even if it's late game. There are cards like that I wouldn't hit, but we're going to talk about other cards that I feel could. Let's take a look at the top 10 cards I would like to see unnerfed for Wild at the upcoming rotation. So, at number 10, I have the Mage spell, Conjurer's Calling. It was originally 3 mana, then it was nerfed to 4 mana, and basically you destroy a minion and you get 2 minions of the same cost. So it was really good with Mountain Giant, which got Hall of Famed anyways, and you know, all other types of cheap giants, and was a flexible copy spell. It was still really good at 4, but basically it never saw a ton of play in Wild. Even at 3 mana, Conjurer's Calling, I think I remember seeing it in like Odd Mage, but it was really fringe, and it's a very, very powerful card, arguably one of the most busted ones ever in Standard, but in Wild, never really saw the light of day. So I feel like you could bump it down to 3 cost in mana, see how it goes, and maybe it'd be a relevant card, because as it stands, Conjurers is basically a non-existent card in Wild, and maybe this bump up would make it so. At number 9, and this might surprise some people considering how much I don't like this card, but I could put my personal bias aside, but I'm going to say Dragon Queen Alextraza. It was nerfed twice. I wouldn't revert both nerfs, but the first nerf made it so it couldn't get itself, and then the second nerf was that the dragons, instead of costing 0, they cost 1. And basically killed the card in Wild. It completely killed it, and in Standard it sees a little bit of play, but 0 mana dragons for 9 mana just seems like something that is Wild. It just feels like a Wild card. It's ridiculous. It does incredibly powerful things, but it's 9 mana, which is almost a death sentence in Wild, and even unnerfed it didn't see a ton of play in Wild, and I just feel like you revert it back to 0 cost dragons, and it just feels like a Wild card. It's absolutely ridiculous. You never know what can happen. There's a lot of cool memes that can happen, like getting Emeruses, having Bran, all sorts of cool stuff like that. So I would revert Dragon Queen. I don't really care for the card, but I can see how it's 0 mana would make a lot more sense in Wild than it is right now. At number 8, we have the Warlock spell Fiendish Rites. Originally 3 mana, then bumped to 4 mana. It gave your minions +1 attack, and then invoke your Galakron. This was like a micro adjustment nerf to like try and make Galakron Warlock a little more reasonable, although it wasn't never that busted. Felt like this nerf, period, probably should never have happened, even in Standard. So I would just revert it for Wild. A 3 mana Fiendish Rites still feels like bad. It like would still probably see no play. Galakrond Warlock, that type of thing, is basically never existed in Wild. So Fiendish Rites back to 3. Hell, you could probably make it 2, and it still wouldn't see much play. So I'd have absolutely no problem seeing Fiendish Rites knocked down back to 3 mana. At number 7, I have the Rogue Minion Necreum Apothecary. I remember when this card was revealed, I said it would get nerfed, and it did. Like, you're just cheating out mechanical whelps. Really stupid stuff really early. And it got bumped up to 5 mana. I feel like in Wild, this type of a high roll is a little bit obnoxious. This is one I'm probably the most hesitant about recommending. But I feel like Rogue just isn't really that good at playing these type of decks and living. I feel like Wild, there's more stuff you can do in this regard with like Big Rogue, like Cobalt Illusionist, and there are some pretty cool memes with like the big Deathwing that cheats out other dragons. I feel like you could put this back to 4, and in Wild, you wouldn't break the format. It would probably be playable, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But, you know, it could enable some insane big stuff in Rogue, and we really haven't seen that pop up lately. So, Necreum Apothecary, I'm hesitant, but I think I could recommend that one going back down to 4 mana. And number 6, we have the Mage Minion Dragon Caster. Originally, it was a 6 mana 4/4 that if you're holding a dragon, your next spell costs 0. It was bumped up to 7. This was basically a way for Blizzard to nerf Puzzle Box in Standard, so people wouldn't be puzzle boxing every game and cheating it out so easily. It came a turn later. But in Wild, I mean, Dragoncaster saw play in Luna's Pocket Galaxy Mage, but it wasn't like making or breaking it. It just made it a little bit more consistent. And again, any deck that's like really slow in this regard that needs that big high roll, I feel like you can give it a little bit of help. I think Dragoncaster down to 6 would make a lot of sense. It'd be a lot more fair. And again, it's Wild, right? You do broken stuff and Dragoncaster can help with that. There's a lot more broken stuff going on a lot more earlier than Dragoncaster in Wild. So I wouldn't really see an issue with that popping up. At number 5, we have Mogu Fleshaper, the Shaman minion. It's a 7 mana 3/4 with Rush, and it got it costs 1 less for every minion on the board. It got bumped all the way up to 9 mana, so 2 mana increase because Evolve Shaman and all this type of archetypes are really good in Standard, and this was like a really big part of it, especially like Mutate. I think you could bump it down to 8, bump it down to 7, and it's a reasonable wild card. Evolve Shaman isn't really that good in Wild, and even with this at 7 mana, I couldn't see it really putting it over the top, but it would probably make it a lot more competitive. It would make Desert Hare Mogu a lot more viable of getting that big high roll mana cheat out. And again, in terms of comparing it to things like Darkglare Warlock, that's not much of a mana cheat in comparison. So Mogu, I feel like could definitely go back down to 7, and maybe you could go Giggling Inventor and like go halfway where Giggly went from 7 to 6 rather than 7 to 5. You could go like Mogu to 8 mana instead or something like that. At number 4, we have yet another Shaman minion. This is Corrupt Elementalist. It's a 6 mana 3/3 Battlecry. Invoke twice. You get 2/2/2/1s with Rush with your Shaman Galakrond. Originally it was 5 mana, and I would just put it right back down to 5. Galakrond Shaman in Wild was really good. Don't get me wrong, it was actually pretty good. I remember getting Legend with it before any Galakrond Shaman card was nerfed. But with cards like Rat Pack being nerfed, and I wouldn't suggest unnerfing that one. I think that one was like one of the biggest offenders. I think you could put Corrupt Elementalist down. It's still very slow for Wild, but it'd be really cool to, kind of revisit Galakrond Shaman because it's really unplayable as it stands. Everything is just way too slow about it. So I would unnerf this card. This was like one of the best invoke cards you could get. You could activate your Dragon's Pack a lot earlier. And again, if it's not as in huge stats, they're not 5/6s, maybe that's more reasonable. And I just kind of want to play some Galakrond Shaman again. It would be pretty cool. And in that vein, at number 3, I have the other invoke card for Shaman, Invocation of Frost. This is a 2 mana spell that freezes an enemy, freezes an enemy, and then you invoke. And I would just bump it back down to 1. You put both of the invoke cards back to where they were. You put Corrupt to 1. 1 would be insane. You put Corrupt to 5. You put Invocation of Frost to 1. And then all of a sudden, maybe Galakrond Shaman could see a little bit of play in Wild, and I think that would be perfectly fine. It's not like it's going to be OP or broken compared to a lot of the other decks. And again, as I said, with the Dragon's Pack still being nerfed, I think this would be a much more reasonable deck. And it'd be a lot of fun for people that want to play something in Wild that's Shaman, that isn't just even Shaman. And heck, Shaman's not in the best of spots in Wild to begin with, so I think it could use some help. At number 2, I have the Rogue Galakrond, one of my favorite cards. Just kidding, but I think this card definitely should be unnerfed for a Wild. Right now, it's 7 mana, and you get to draw either 1, 2, or 4 cards that cost 1 mana. And of course, you get the Infinite Lackey, Hero Power, all that. But I would just nerf it, revert it back to 0-cost cards. I think 0-cost cards are fine in Wild. Like, it's Wild. It's a kind of a crazy format. This is 7 mana. The way the Rogue Galakron is right now, there's no way you can play this card. It is just way too slow in Wild. The fact you have to play 7 and wait to play your 1-cost cards is ridiculous. Galakrond Rogue in Wild basically was never really meta. Some people put it in Odd Rogue, but it was more of like a greed option. And, the like Reno Rogues and all of that, they were never really viable. They were never really great. And putting the Rogue Galakron back to where it was, I think would do some work. I don't think it would be a top tier deck, but you could have some of those broken turns. And I guess the cards like Polkelt, you never know with the 0 mana cards, it could be even more insane. So I'd like to see the Rogue Galakron unnerfed. It feels very Wild to me and certainly would fit the bill. So my number 1 is not a card from this current rotation that's going out. It's not part of these sets. This is a little bit older. This is a personal 100%. This is what I want, not what I think is good for the game. This is selfish, but I know a lot of people love playing this, and I'm going to recommend Lich Poison. This is a 1 mana spell that gives your weapon lifesteal this turn. It originally was 2 mana, give your weapon lifesteal. And we've seen with like Demon Hunter, with Eldraki Warblades, all the lifesteal stuff going on with weapons. I want to go back to making a gigantic Kingsbane weapon with lifesteal, going infinite, milling my opponent with cold lights. I want to go back to that. If Raza Priest players get to play unnerfed Raza Priest, I want to play unnerfed Leeching Poison. And the only reason I think that this could happen or should happen is because a card like Sticky Fingers, Cobalt Sticky Fingers, exists now. You can actually counter this. Like, if they have an infinite lifesteal weapon, you can just yoink it from them. There is a tech card that didn't exist when Leeching Poison originally got nerfed. I feel like it could go back into Wild. I feel like this could belong, and I miss those days. I love playing my lifesteal Kingsbane weapon, but I know a lot of people really hated it, so this might be a little bit divisive. But again, this is my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with it. And on that vein, if you have your own suggestions, your own preferences of what you'd like to see unnerfed, let me know in the comments below. And if you hate Leeching Poison, let me know even more. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day, and stay salty, my friends.